Hey y'all, my name is Adina Barnett Miller, but I'm known to my students as Mrs. B. I've been passionate about West Virginia history for as long as I can remember, but my mom would tell you it all started when I was 3 years old and she bought me a West Virginia counties puzzle at Gino's Pizza. I've taught history in Ripley, West Virginia for over 20 years now, and I'm an adjunct professor who teaches college West Virginia history to high school students. Please join me for West Virginia History with Mrs. B, a field trip across the Mountain State to walk in the footsteps of those who came before us. Hey y'all, it's West Virginia History with Mrs. B, and I'm coming to you today from Monongah, which is in Marion County. And Monongah was the site of the deadliest mine disaster in American history. And so we're going to begin with the West Virginia historical marker, which was placed here in Monongah in 1963 for the 100th anniversary of West Virginia. And this sign denotes that on the 6th of December in 1907, 361 coal miners, many of them from countries far across the sea, perished under these hills in the worst mining disaster in our nation's history. The 4 men who escaped did die of their injuries. So let's pick some of that apart before we move on. So we don't know exactly how many men and boys perished in this mining disaster. The official total that they give is 361. However, the tag board that everybody put their tag on when they went into the mine blew up because this mine disaster was of such epic proportions. It blasted like windows and chunks of concrete. I mean, it was a massive, massive explosion. So for a lot of historians, they place this number much closer to 500 because, again, we don't know who all was in the mines, and a lot of the bodies weren't recovered, and it doesn't take into consideration all of the boys who were working their mine with the fathers or worked as trap boys or worked with the mules. So this, official total 361 is the highest count in American history. But keep in mind, it's probably much closer to 500. I also want to point out, it says many of these miners were from countries far across the sea. The majority of these miners were from Italy, and most of them were from Calabria, Italy. And so if you look at pictures from this time period, you will see the devastation that happened at the mine face where the explosion happened. But you'll also see pictures of rows of coffins lined up and down the street here in Monongah as well. So we want to show you 2 memorials here. They're pretty easy to find. They're right across from Monongah Town Hall. And so this is a bell that was placed here on the 100th anniversary of the disaster. And the plaque says, "This is in loving memory of the sons of Molise who tragically lost their lives in the mining disaster." And so this was dedicated from people from Italy in honor of their immigrant ancestors who perished here in 1907. It's a beautiful, beautiful bell. There are going to be over 1,000 widows and orphans because of this disaster. Dealing with the disaster got drug out because the Consolidated Coal Company mine owners who owned this mine did not want to have to pay any money out to the people whose families lost their lives. The coroner's court in Marion County will rule that this was a disaster due to a buildup of coal dust and that a spark ignited it. But we really don't know because there wasn't anyone who survived that could tell the story of what happened underground. Because the mine exploded with such force, it took days and days and days just to be able to get inside of the mine because they had to dig out from the coal face to get back into the mine to start reclaiming the bodies. And not all the bodies were ever reclaimed.
I've heard a story on that there was a woman who lost, I think, her husband and a couple sons that were never found, never recovered. And she would go back to that mine site every day for like 15 or 20 years and pick through the rubble just to find some. Them. Yeah,
I don't think we have a modern understanding of just how monumental this was Every person in this community was touched by this. Either someone they knew or, you know, someone in their family was lost. This is not a big community, and so because of moments like this, you never recover from something like this. You just try to find a way to move forward, and I can't imagine losing both your husband and your children as well. That's something that breaks you in ways that there's no coming back from. All right, we're now with another one of the memorials. This was also placed here in 2007 on the 100th anniversary of the disaster. And this shows what is known as the Monongah heroine, and that's the mother with her children who has, you know, lost their father, or possibly, you know, even their siblings, older siblings in the mine. So this says, in memory of the widowed wives and mothers of the victims of the Monongah coal mine disaster, December 6th, 1907, all of them long gone, but ever in our hearts. And it says, we hear their ghostly pickaxe in the shuttered mine. So this memorial has several tablets on it. We're going to show those to
Before
you.
we go over there, just that top line there, in the excess of her sorrow, brave beyond words.
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect
Absolutely.
description.
Well, when you think about these women, the owners in the mines basically tried to wait these widows out. Like, they thought if they waited and didn't pay out, that they'd give up and they would leave. But these women were super strong. These women were super passionate, and they didn't give up and they didn't leave. They stayed. Like, even though they didn't have food to feed their families, like, they stayed and waited it out, because they said, you know, our husbands were killed, our children were killed. We need justice for our families. And so they eventually do end up with a payout. It's not a lot, but they do end up with a payout from the Consolidated Coal Company, or what we call Consol. And so this shows some of the people who contributed to this memorial. And then on the back, it explains that this was put here in 2017 and
2007.
I'm sorry, 2007, and 2007 seems like it was yesterday, even though it's a long time ago. And that it was put here by folks from Calabria, Italy, as well as then Governor Manchin of the state of West Virginia, who is from Marion County and who lost an uncle in another coal mining disaster. And so this also talks about the other donors to this monument as well. So this is beautiful. It's not far out of downtown Fairmont. So if you want to come and pay your respects, this is right across from the Monongah Town Hall here in Monongah, West Virginia, in Marion County. Hey y'all, it's West Virginia History with Mrs. B, and we are in Mount Calvary Cemetery in Monongah, West Virginia, and we are with a monument that was put here in 2007 on the centennial of the Monongah disaster. This was erected by the Italian government in honor of the many Italians, immigrants who perished in this disaster. So the monument says, on December 6, 1907, 361 men, many of whom were Italian, perished in the mines of Monongah, West Virginia. These men were often accompanied by their young sons and other family members who assisted them in the mine. There were countless others who lost their lives that day and who still remain unknown. Only God knows their faces, their names, and their true number who departed on this life. And it says, on that fateful day, our town of Monongah pulled together and buried its dead. These men, mostly buried within the arms of this cemetery, left their wives and children in this country in a land far away. May all the souls buried in this hallowed place rest in eternal peace, and may they find comfort in our memories. And so if you just come with me, I'm going to show you there are several people who passed away in the Monongah disaster, buried just right through here. We're going to Actually, you know what? I'm such a klutz. We're gonna go this way.
I was going to suggest that.
I know my limits, and so all of these are people who died in Monongah, and so some of them, like this one right here, it's not even in English.
Peter Rossa.
Yeah. So, and you can tell it says Monongah, West Virginia, and then it has number 6, and that they have the 1907.
Right.
So,
And I mean, you had a lot of international folks. I think we have, I know there's one over there from Italy to the right of the monument.
yeah.
I think,
Look at this one. This one's in 1907 too, right here. This is beautiful. Here's another one, 1907. I don't think I was prepared for how much this was going to touch me when we came today, since these people had passed away so long ago. But you know, in doing reading, preparing for this, to think about the fact that there are multiple memorials in the country of Italy, in Calabria, which is where most of these Italian miners came from. There are multiple monuments to the people of, like, in each individual community that lost miners in this disaster. So, you know, when you look at it and you look at these headstones, and you can pretty much point out based on their age that these were, you know, people who lost their lives here in Monongah. He was in mine number 8.
my Italian is pretty much non-existent, but I'm willing to guess 27 years old.
Yeah.
It says there.
Yeah. Carmino Ziolo. Just, you know, there's just no words for seeing this in person. You know, there's one thing, I always tell my students, it's one thing to teach it, it's another thing to see it. And so this cemetery, if you do come to Monongah, you need to come to see this cemetery, because I think that until you see the headstones, that you don't get a true grasp on how many lives were lost and how many people were impacted, both here in the United States and in Italy. Hey y'all, we are still in the Mount Calvary Cemetery, but I wanted to show you this memorial in particular, because this is what got me all worked up in tears. But it says, in memoriam, in these trenches lie an unknown number of mining heroes, some not old enough to know about life. Only God knows their names and ages, and they have been gone for many years, but their courage is not forgotten, and may we meet them in heaven one day. And this is right here in memory of Chester Morris. But these are the unmarked graves from the Monongah disaster, where their families may have not had the money to pay for headstones, or their bodies were unidentifiable. So that's why this hillside right here is left, you know, devoid of headstones, is because there are people buried here in these, you know, like a mass grave, but these bodies could not be identified, or their family could not afford to pay to bury them. Hey y'all, just to recap where we've been to the two miners' memorials here in Monongah, as well as the Mount Calvary Cemetery here in Monongah. December 6th is going to hold a different meaning from now on after coming here. But I encourage you, if you do take a trip to Fairmont, this is not far out of the way, but it's definitely worth coming here to see and to pay your respects to what I estimate to be about 500 people who lost their lives in the worst mining disaster in American history here at Monongah in Marion County. And so, you know, it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to see, you know, all of those headstones up there with the same date. And so, You know, we remember those who lost their lives. It's our job and our duty to keep telling their stories and to keep this history alive. And if you're not aware, in 2009, December 6th each year is Miners' Day in the United States. And so the date was specifically chosen so that people could reflect on the Monongah disaster, which is the worst disaster in American history. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Mrs. B, and I love West Virginia even when its history is hard to talk about. Thanks y'all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to West Virginia History with Mrs. B on both Facebook and YouTube.